You have to walk the talk. You have to be authentic as a leader. If you're not doing it, they see that.
It is entirely universal. There's other people who are going through this.
For me, a great leader needs to be able to marry three things: vision, systems, and people.
Welcome to Leadership Moments. If this is your first time, and if you are returning, thank you for your support.
This show is about leaders from all walks of life, leadership tips, and maybe even a little of what you wouldn't expect to help you in leadership.
We would appreciate it if you tell someone else about our podcast as we strive to support all leaders that want to just be better.
Let's get on with the show.
Today, our guest is Andy Reid. Andy is an award-winning auctioneer, host of the Success Curious podcast, high-performance coach, author, and speaker. He is also the director of Apollo Auctions Victoria, a full-service auctioneering company servicing more than 130 different real estate agencies. His industry expertise and leadership have earned him recognition as the #1 real estate auctioneer in Australia in 2022. With a remarkable career that began with operating a $13 million business at just 21 years old, Andy has spent 2 decades leading large teams, doubling profit margins, and building cultures centered on high performance and 360-degree accountability across various industries, including hospitality, real estate, sales, and training. After launching his podcast in 2023, he is now releasing his first book, Success Curious, alongside Major Street Publishing. Today, we are going to talk about how our perceptions can impact us without us even realizing it, as well as how to help the younger generation succeed. Let's jump in. Andy, I'm really excited to have you on the show today. We talked a lot before this show, and you told me a wonderful story about perspectives and how people see things. And the story you told me was about your son one day, and I'd love for you to share that with our audience to start.
Cool. Well, look, first off, thank you so much for having me. I feel somewhat privileged to be doing a podcast with the what was it, the nation's most empowered woman, or something. Like, wow, I feel like I need to be bowing down and saying how great I am and all that sort of jazz, right? So thank you so much for having me. Anyway, so yes, the boy. So I have 2 kids, and they are both awesome. Elijah's now 10. Callum is 6. But when he was 5, I was training. I was doing some exercise in the gym, aka my garage, and I'm beavering away. And the boy comes in, Callum, his name is, and he goes, "Dad, can I come train with you?" I'm like, "Yeah, sweet, Dad, sweet, son, no problem." And so he starts hitting the punching bag, and as we're in between sets, he turns around to me and he flexes and he goes, "Dad, look at me. I've got 21 abs." As little boys generally tend to get overly excited. And I didn't want to rain on his parade or pee on his bonfire. So I was like, son, that is amazing. Great work, my boy. Good stuff. And so he carried on his merry way, beating the crap out of his punching bag. And then fast forward a couple of days later, and my daughter, who is way too observant, right? To the point where I can't get away with anything without her radaring somewhere, right? And she was sat on at the kitchen bench on the opposite side from me. I was doing something in the kitchen, and Cal, who had taken his top off to show me the 21 abs, a couple of days later, he walks back around the corner. He's not got his top on, so I'm spotting a trend here, right, where we're half naked most of the time. And he goes, "Dad," and I went, "What's up, boy?" And he goes, "I've only got 2 abs today." And I went, "Well, that's okay, son. I mean, they come and go. That's all right." And then he said to me, he goes, "Dad, what do I need to do to get more abs?" And I was in autopilot. I was messing around with dishes and doing something for lunch or something. I said, "Well, son," I went into autopilot mode. I said, "Well, son, you got to be disciplined." And as I said it, Eliza stopped what she was doing and looked at me, right? But I didn't really pay much attention. And Cal goes, "And what do you mean by that, Dad?" And I said, "Well, you've got to come get back in the garage with me and do the press up, do the workouts and all that, and build your muscles and keep your muscles going." And Eliza went, "Hold on, Dad." I went, "What?" And she goes, "You said Cal needed to be disciplined." And I went, "Yeah." She goes, "What? So you mean he needs to be told off?" And a penny dropped right at that moment, right? Bless her. a penny dropped in a big, big way, because as human beings, obviously, our programming, the vast majority of our programming comes from when we were kids, right? And when we look at some of the words and some of the things that we talk about when it comes to this whole topic of success, the perspective that we have on them as adults is very different to when we were kids. And the problem is our wiring from when we were kids is still with us when we're adults in many senses, right? And in their opinion, when it came to Elijah and Cal, when I said you got to be disciplined, they thought basically you got to get told off for doing something wrong. And I went, crap, that makes a lot of sense, because when we think about the things that make success hard, right? I mean, anything worth having is never easy, right? But at the same time, we don't help ourselves, because when you think about words like discipline and sacrifice and consistency and commitment and all this sort of jazz, right? None of these words, if we think about it back from when we were kids, were that nice, right? They weren't that great. I mean, you take sacrifice, for example, right? You go biblical with it. It involved 2 planks of wood and some nails, right? So and if you look at the definition of sacrifice, it means to kill off a part of, or to kill off something, right? For the worship of whatever, right? And so we as human beings, we've got all this wiring from back in the day, and yet we're trying to use all these words like they're supposed to be inspirational when it comes to us trying to find a better version of ourselves, right? And I think we're kind of talking ourselves out of it a little bit when you think about it like that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's such a great story. And it's so true that we are ingrained with what we're taught when we're little. And, there's so many things that we don't realize what those are and the negative impacts. And I love this story because it really brings home like how you think about things in everyday life, when you think about your career, when you think about your family, when you just think about just moving forward, and you don't even realize what possibly you're doing to yourself, meaning it's not necessarily a positive way. Or are you really opening up to what's possible for you and in empowering yourself? And what is that perspective? And which is something that we talk about, right? With those lenses that we have on us. And I love this story because it's just so important to say, like, I don't know about you, but I was always taught, like, work hard and it'll come back. If you want something done for yourself, if you want something done right, do it for yourself. Well, how is that collaboration? How is that enabling me to do other things if I have to do everything myself? And so just something as simple as discipline, right? It is, do I have to do the grind and all that? And it's really, really important. We had a recent guest that talked about how he had to untrain himself from the grind. And, it's very, very true. So I love this piece and that story. So I have to ask you, like, what have you done about this since this happened? Like, what have you changed in yourself, or how do you think about it for you and others?
Well, the thing is, Stacey, that the concepts of these words are spot on, right? They're absolutely true. Okay. So we're not necessarily saying that in concept, these things are incorrect, right? I mean, think about it. If you were to put it into a lot less of a crucifix type analogy, if you were to put it into donuts, right? Let's go to donuts. And we know science has proven that if you want to get fit and healthy, you really shouldn't be shoveling donuts down your throat, right? Donuts are not good for you, right? And so having said that, though, whenever we talk about diets and things, we talk about sacrificing donuts in order to make sure we can get fit and healthy and all the rest of it, right? Now, in concept, absolutely correct. You can't eat donuts and magically get fit, right? It doesn't. I mean, unless you lot have come up with something better than what we have down here in Australia, there isn't no such.
I haven't yet, but I wish I could.
Well, one day. But the thing is, right, if we were to just take the concept and attach a word to it that has a much greater level of positivity to it, then we're probably going to give ourselves a much greater chance of making it happen. So instead of the word sacrifice, right, which is the giving up of something, why can't we focus on being loyal to the future version of what we want to be, right? Same concept, but looked at from two different perspectives, right? The one perspective is looking at the past you, and the one version is looking at the future you. And when I started really sort of dissecting all these different words to a greater extent and looking at words that are of similar concept in the same ballpark, but have a much greater level of intrinsic motivation attached to them from in terms of what they mean to us, it really got me translating a lot of the things that have been wired into me from back in the day into something that's a lot more internally motivating. It's a lot more internally. It just fires the engines up a lot quicker, right? Because think about it, right? The word loyalty is such a powerful word, right? It's a powerful word. And if you could just focus on being loyal, and you know, I think instead of using the word consistency, you can use the word habit, which is such a good word at the minute, right? I know from the likes of Atomic Habits going intergalactic and all that sort of stuff, right? Habits are something that people are seeing a lot more positively these days, right? So instead of being consistent about something, why can't you just have it as a habit of the future version of what you want to be and what you want to become? And success is a trip. Success is a forever journey, right? But it's the process that gets you to it that makes that makes you feel successful. And Aristotle says it back in the day. He goes, the Greek philosopher, he says, it's all about achieving the master art, right? So people don't become artists because they want the paintings. They want to become artists because they want to become an artist. It's what they become, right? In the trip towards painting a picture successfully, right? So you think about that and go, right, okay, well, I'm a forward moving person because unless we've got a DeLorean, we're going to be forever moving forwards in time, right? So how can we attach those concepts that are absolutely spot on and turn them into something that actually makes us want to do it instead of needing to do it?
I love that. And what I like about loyal is it does a couple things. It, to me, anyway, when you're loyal, it is deep passion and deep care. And I always believe that if you care about something, you will find a way, right? And I talk about that even as a leader. One of my principles is love your team members, because if you love someone, you do more for them. You care for them more in a different way. And loyal is part of that. And what I also like about loyal is with habits, we know that sometimes we falter and we miss that habit that day, or we don't do that thing that day. But loyal gives you that grace that I might miss it, but it doesn't mean that I don't care. It doesn't mean that I still don't want to do it. And I'm going to get back up and I'm going to try again tomorrow and I'm going to do it again. So I really, really like that word. And I'm going to start using it.
Honestly, man, it helps massively on those days where you look at your weights and go, I really can't be bothered. I really can't be bothered to pick you guys up. You're just looking a bit too heavy today. And instead of sacrificing your time or like putting yourself through hard yards, which we know they're going to be difficult anyway. So why are we making it any harder for ourselves, right? The actions that need to be taken are difficult enough. So let's stop messing around and shrouding these actions with words that make it feel impossible to a lot of people, which is why they spend so much money on these stupid courses that never help them get much further, right? I'm getting a bit on my high horse a little bit. It's before I start ranting.
I love it. I love it. Well, hey, that's what we want. We want real people on the show. So we appreciate that, Andy. Everyone is, and it is true. There's a lot of things of, will this really help me, or is it just changing my mindset? And a lot of training and courses are helping you change your mindset. And sometimes that training helps or not. I actually just saw a stat yesterday that said, and I have to remember if I got it right here, it said that 70% of what you learn in a training class is lost because you can't retain it all. And you have to find a way like how to learn something and do it, learn something and do it. And that's part of being loyal and part of building that habit that we're talking about. So I think you might have something there about that.
Well, the coaching industry, I mean, let's not do ourselves out of a job here, Stace, but The coaching, looks like we're doing a good job. The coaching industry is it's predicated on people's need to get better, right? The need to get better, right? And my take on coaching, I didn't want to be a coach for a long time, because I didn't want to be someone who didn't make an impact to the point where people didn't need me anymore. Like the way I see it, and I still see it to a greater extent now, is that if I do my job properly as a coach, then people won't need me. I will coach myself out of a job, right? And that's what I'm supposed to do. That's always my goal. Now, obviously, there's a certain degree of realization when you realize that you can lead, you can sort of open the door, but they've got to walk through it, right? But and you can't force them to do that. But then it comes back to the language that we're using and the way in which we are communicating and creating a connection between the action and the human, right? And that's where I think a lot of the missing links are. Or, there could be a case of some coaches don't want to provide those missing links because then they would be doing themselves out of a job, right? So I think that piece between, we all know the actions. We all know what it takes to be successful. It's been in there since bloody day dot, right? We all know. But the thing that I'm starting to challenge a lot more people with is it's not even how, why aren't you doing it? Right? Because that's the question that needs to be asked, because there are umpteen number of millions and millions and millions of bits of data and articles and free YouTube videos and all this sort of stuff, right? It's all there. Why aren't you doing it?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is so true. And I love what you said there, because there's a couple things. First of all, as a coach, right? That's why I do a lot of training and coaching together, because you're right, you don't retain it and you have to build it. And it is about, one, you have to walk through the door and be willing to learn. And two, you have to be willing to really dig deep and say, what is truly stopping me? Because sometimes it has nothing to do with what you think it has to do with. And by with good coaches, ask a lot of great questions. And with those questions, the client will get to what those results are and what it truly is, and then be accountable for actually making those changes that they want. So I totally agree with you on that. The other piece that I wanted to say was, I tell leaders all the time that when your direct reports get promoted, that's a compliment to you. That means that you actually help them achieve. If they always report to you, then are you really leading? Are you really helping them? I mean, part of your job is to help other people grow and develop, which is why I became a coach, because that's what I enjoyed the most. But it's so true that, you might have this hesitancy, even as a leader or a coach or whatever, of like, oh, I don't want to lose the people that I have. But the reality is, that just means you're doing your job when you do, when you see them growing and developing and going on and moving on to new, bigger and better things that they need. So I love that piece that you mentioned.
You can relate it to relationships as well, right? If you have any concerns, or if you're worried about, or if people get worried about losing their spouses, for example, they'll want to make sure that they stay small, they play small, right? Because they get worried that if they grow, then they might leave, right? And it happens all the time in relationships where people feel like they're held back because of their spouse's inability to want to lead in that relationship and help the other person to grow, right? It applies to everything. It applies to your kids. It applies to everybody that you know, right? And it's something that I'll put in the book. I'm a massive fan of the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. It's one of the all timers, right? One of the all timers. But I went on a 3-day course. Back when I was running restaurants and bars, I got sent on a 3-day course out for this book. And the thing that penny dropped for me wasn't the 7 habits, right? Which is what most people focus on. It's the outcome from ticking those 7 habits off, which is interdependence. You talked about it just before, right? Where you said, I'm going to do all this by myself. I'm going to be successful by myself. I'm going to achieve all this by myself. And ultimately, we were never supposed to. Like the reality is, we've all got our own faults and whatnot. And I'm a massive, and I said this once in a live stream during COVID, during a lockdown. someone told me I should put it on a bumper sticker. So that vulnerability is the key to true professionalism. You can't be authentic or have integrity or be transparent if you're not willing to own up to the things you're not good at. Right. And as soon as you've let that click into gear in a positive sense, vulnerability being a positive thing, and you are able to articulate it in such a way as to not harm yourself in any way, or your progress in any way, shape, or form. As soon as you work that out, then this game gets very, very interesting, because it becomes a lot easier for you to be able to identify the people that you can be interdependent with, you know? So I just find that if we can do that, if we can be a lot more comfortable in our vulnerability, then it allows us to become interdependent way easier, which is the whole point of those 7 habits. It's that big circle around the outside of that diagram, right? So, yeah, man, and that's right. It's sort of something that when you mentioned there, you can't do it by yourself, like one was supposed to do, right? You're not supposed to. We are pack animals. And on this, right, I want to ask you something, Stace. You know how this whole notion of self, right? Everyone's banging on about self-development and, self-care and self this and self that and self the other. I noticed the trend, the use of the suffix self, and the interesting relation and correlation that it has to the growth in mental health issues, right? Because we're almost being coached, generically speaking, we're almost being coached into being so self-sufficient, self-efficient, and you know what I mean? Self-attained and you know what, and all that sort of jazz. When DNA, we weren't supposed to be self anything. And we wonder why there's a big correlation between our selfness and not a word, selfness and all these mental health challenges in the world, like, and the inability to be able to articulate our mental health challenges. What do you think about that? Like, have you felt that there's like too much of this self carry on, and it goes against that interdependence notion, right?
Yeah. That's a great question. I love that you bring this up. So I've done a lot of studies on generations, and I'm trying to work with the Gen Z coming into the world and helping the baby boomers and the Gen X, and how do they relate to the Gen Z? What do we need to do? All that kind of stuff. And in my research, I found that individualization, which is what you're talking about, has skyrocketed. And that's really what has defined the difference in generations. So typically, when you separate the generations, it is about events in the world and whether you've experienced that event or didn't experience that event, like the 2008, 2007 financial crisis, like 9/11 in the States, things like that. COVID, that is probably going to define a generation. But the real piece has been individualization. And you're right, it is about that. And I think there's a lot of positive in the fact that people are more comfortable, I believe, I see it, in expressing their needs. Where if you go back to the 50s and 60s, or, even earlier, you had to be a certain way. You were told to show up a certain way. Like, think about it. Women wore heels, even in the house. They had to put on their makeup before their husband came home. And, and the men had to wear their suits all the time, even when they went out of the house. Right. And so there were things that you had to show up a certain way, where now, okay, yeah, people are wearing pajama pants to the store, and that might be something that might be too far. I don't know. Everyone, be themselves. But the point is that they can show up for who they are and who they want to be. And that in itself is a beautiful thing. Now that compared with what is it doing to, and now I want to be myself, and do I really want to follow the rules of my work environment? That becomes a little tricky. And that's what I've been trying to work with the generation research that I've been doing with people.
It's really interesting, right? So as for part of the research I was doing with the book, I dug into the generational side of things, because I've had this observation, there's all this intergenerational, spat, right? The resentment of from one generation to another. And I've looked at it, right, as the sandwich, as the meat in the sandwich, because it's generally your Gen X's versus your Gen Z's, right? Or your boomers versus your Gen Z's, where the older generations think that the Gen Z's are lazy ass, and the Gen Z's are going, well, you're just faffing around, right? You're working for what, right? And I'm the sandwich in the middle, the meat in the sandwich tray, and I'm looking up, right, and going, you've got that much wealth of knowledge and experience. It's not even funny. And then I'm looking down and I'm going, crap, the scale to which you can communicate is absolutely mental. And I'm thinking, shit, if these two generations figure out that if they were to work together, my generation would be in deep shit, right? Because, like, really would. Because if those two generations came together, you'd have knowledge, wisdom, experience with scale. It'd be epic. It'd be absolutely epic. But one thing I wanted to challenge you on with the whole individualization thing is one study that I read was about how Gen Zs right now have got a real identity crisis because of the fact that there's that much noise going. It's not their fault. There's that much noise going on in the world, right? That it's made it really, really difficult for that generation to even hear themselves think or feel, right? So we talk about the freedom of individualization in principle is tremendous, but when you are free to be anything you want to be, it can be really difficult to work out what the hell that is, right? And so the propensity for Gen Zs to attach themselves to something greater than themselves is becoming bigger and bigger and bigger because of the fact that they need something to validate their existence. They need something to give them that identity. And it's one of the reasons, right, when you observe the world and you see so many more protests going on these days than there has been for donkeys, right? For years and years and years. And it's not because the majority of these people just want to cause trouble, right? A lot of the time, the vast majority of the time, these people have got the best intentions in the world. However, a lot of it's to do with the fact that they need something to give them identity because they're struggling to find it out for themselves. And so, for example, the whole Israel-Palestine thing, like, we're not going to get into it, but for a fact that if you would go into a pro-Palestine protest, right, which is done lovely and peacefully, wonderful, you take a map in there and ask them to point out where Gaza is, they couldn't tell you. They've got all the best intentions from a humanitarian point of view to do the right thing, right? So we're not knocking them. It's just the fact that they're using it to fulfill their lack of identity. And that's a massive issue for the world. And you put it into a work parlance, into a business parlance. If you as a business owner, right, are not giving your Gen Z workers some sense of identity for themselves, you are going to find yourself with a revolving door in and out of your workforce, right? Because naturally, because of the fact that we can all start a business on the end of our thumb, right, with our phone, the ease at which people could just say, get stuffed, I'm leaving, right, it's never been easier. However, I would argue that if we're to treat Gen Z workers as numbers as opposed to giving them personally a sense of identity, then they will have zero reason to be loyal to your business, and they will shut off. They will go. So we can argue that it's technology's fault, but you could also counter argue and say, well, no, what have you actually done to make them feel like to give them a sense of identity within your workforce? What have you done? And you could argue there'd be very little.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And it's so true. Because of social media, because of technology, you just simplified that very much, like very well into, okay, this is what we need to think about is how do you do that? Because there are a lot of people that believe, and I feel like I see this with every generation, but like the older generation always says, they don't want to work as hard. They don't want to do that. Well, actually, Gen Z, because they saw their parents go through the financial crisis, money and stability is very important to them. extremely important to them, where they will work very hard, but they also want to work hard for a purpose, not just because you told them to. So I think it goes back to that identity of who am I? How am I showing up in this world? How am I helping this world? And where's my spot in this world?
Big
So I
time.
think that's really, really good point.
Big time. They need to feel like they are doing something greater than themselves.
Yes. Yes.
That's what they need. They need to feel like their contribution is doing something bigger than just giving them a paycheck. So if your organization has not got no greater purpose other than just making $1 squillion, right? Then you're in trouble. You're in deep trouble. And you can say, oh, well, I could just offer it to VAs and all that sort of stuff. Yeah, you could. You could. But if you're in a service-based industry, yep, good luck. Because the need to feel human has never been greater. There's that Pareto principle, right, of AI taking 80% of jobs, right? It will, right? But here's the beautiful thing. I see it as a massive positive because 80% of the work we do doesn't really need any real human touch. And it allows us an ability to be bloody human again. How good's that? How amazing is that? Is the challenge. We've been so drilled from from the capitalist wave, and I'm pro capitalism, right? So we're not going to get into that carry on, but because of the way in which it's been drilled into society, you can't blame social media and technology because ultimately they're inanimate objects. It's how humans have used it, right? And to shortcut their existence. And so, if we don't twig onto the fact that the technology and AI and all this sort of stuff, all it's designed to do is to give us more time to be human. Then if you ain't realized that, then you are going to be in trouble and your job's in jeopardy and your business and your organization's in jeopardy. It's hilarious, right? I made this observation. It's weird how technology is becoming more human. And there have been studies, MRI studies, brain scan studies to show that humans are actually becoming more mechanical and more robotic, which is quite scary, right? Like, the creative part of our brains are shrinking off the back of the fact that we're relying on technology to think more creatively. So it's a little bit scary in that respect, but it can be a beautiful thing if you are. And a lot of people are just being exposed for the fact that they've forgotten how to be human again. They've forgotten how to be human.
Right. No, and that study that you're talking about, there's already studies showing, just for our listeners in case they don't know, there's studies showing that with people using AI and using it for the creative side, because you can use AI for lots of things, but when you're using it for the creative side, you actually are lessening your brain intelligence for creativity and using less that part of your brain for creativity. And that's already, like, if you think about AI has been around for decades, but generative AI, the most recent AI, since that has started, it hasn't been that long, and studies are already finding this. So I think when everyone, absolutely, I believe in AI. I've been in technology most of my career. People know that, but leveraging AI is important, but how you leverage it and making sure that you're still using your own creativity along with it is what the key is. So I'm really glad that you brought that up, Andy. It's a good point.
Big time, man. And being a human's awesome. Like, we're very lucky, right? And one thing I learned through the process of writing this book is there's going to be no one else like you. There's going to be no one else like Stacey. There's going to be no one else like Andy, right? So take the chance and run with it, right? I had, and I'll finish on this story, right? Because I'm conscious that I've taken up too much of your time. But I'll finish on this story. So when I was in the middle of writing a book, I had a massive attack of imposter syndrome, right? Massive attack of imposter syndrome. And I was like, right, crap, I need to just send the first chunk of the book through to the publisher to get some positive affirmation, all right? To get a little pat on the bum to say, you're doing all right, Andy. I'm like, okay, cool. So I send that through. And she sent me a 1-sentence email back saying, Andy, and it wasn't even hi, Andy. It was Andy, ... Where's all the swearing? And I was like, that's a bit confusing. I didn't quite get that. Because I was trying to be all clever, right? The first chunk of my book, I'm trying to be all Shakespearean and whatnot, dusting off the multiple syllables and all this sort of jazz, like the ones that are in the back of the cabinet never get used, right? And I'm trying to sound dead clever. And so I call her in and I said that to her. I said, she goes, where's all this? Andy, there's not been a conversation where you haven't sworn. And I went, yeah, but I'm trying to be all intelligent and stuff. Like, she goes, but Andy, look, please take this the right way. Being clever doesn't suit you. And I was like, you bitch. Was like, you know, really? I was like, I was not impressed by that comment. And she goes, and I said, what do you mean? And she goes, Andy, let me explain this to you. She goes, understand this. There are millions of people that know what you know. I went, shit. And she goes, but that's not why you got the book deal. You got the book deal because of who you are, not what you know. And after my ego, my incredibly damaged and bruised and dented ego just fucking settled down for a little bit, right? I let it marinate. I was like, wow, she's right. And I think a lot of the time we hold ourselves back because of the fact that we see and hear a lot of other people do and say a lot of the things that we're thinking and whatever. Or AI or someone says, oh, I did this on AI, and you go, well, shit, I've just spent 2 hours trying to do something, and then they've just told me that they've done it in 5 minutes on AI, right? Ultimately, though, gang, there's only going to be one person that can deliver any of this information in the way that you can, and some people will get it, and some people won't. It's the same with leadership. Some people will get you, and some people won't. That's okay. Because at the end of the day, you can't be nothing else. So why try? Just be, and it sounds very cliched and obvious, right? Just be who you are, right? But ultimately, the thing for me that really has released me when it comes to this is just being happy to accept the fact that there are millions of people that know what I know. So many people know what I know. I am not Einstein by a distance, right? But I'm me. And no one else can beat me. And Gordon Ramsay actually got questioned on this, actually, when he got asked, you know, why do you keep making all these cookbooks, man? Why do you keep making all these cookbooks? And he turned around and said, I could give them all the recipes, but none of them are going to be me making it. How good's that?
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
How good
That's
is
good.
that, man? So,
That's a great story. That's a great story. You know what I love about that story is as you're telling the story, you're actually increasing the amount of curse words that you're saying throughout the story.
I tried so hard. And if anyone
I love it. It's a great story. It is about being true and authentic to yourself. All right.
People have asked me if AI wrote the book for us. So read the first page and a half, and you tell me if AI wrote that, right?
All right. Would you rather have the ability to teleport anywhere instantly or be able to speak every language fluently?
Speak every language by a distance.
Yeah.
There's 3 people.
I agree.
When Kim Jong-un and Donald Trump met, there was 3 people in the room, and those 2 lads were not the most powerful person in the room. It was the translator.
All right. Do you prefer spending a weekend exploring a new city or spending a weekend completely relaxing at home?
Depends on the mood, but I'm a very concrete jungle guy, so I'd go city.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, Andy, thank you so much. You brought so many great nuggets to our listeners. I know that they're going to be very valuable. I know I'm going to start using the word loyal more often myself, so I appreciate that. And I think that we have a lot for people to think about with Gen Z and how they're leading them and helping them along the way, and maybe not making some assumptions as maybe some people are as well. So staying curious, what's your perspective? What words are you using? So many good things to take away from. Really appreciate your time today.
Well, I'll stay, like I said, the pleasure is always mine. When I'm in the presence of royalty, I can't but be appreciative.
All right, we just have to say real quick, what Andy's talking about is I was just able to go to New York City and I won an award, and I was on the NASDAQ billboard. And so I was telling Andy about it before this recording. So that's why he's talking about it. It was like 15 seconds of fame, but it was awesome.
I got all starry eyed, right? I'm going to be asking her for an autograph after this, by the way, team.
That's going to get you absolutely nothing. It might actually lose value over time. Who knows? All right. Thanks, Andy. Really appreciate your time today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
If you enjoyed the show, please go to leadershipmomentspodcast.com to subscribe to the podcast or on your favorite player, as well as follow us on Instagram and LinkedIn.
You can also send us a message on what you like and don't like, or what guest you want us to have on the show.
So until next time.
This is Stacey Castor, and what doesn't challenge you won't change you.
And I'm Tracy Ann Palmer. Be the change you wish to see in the world.